Welcome to a story buried in the shadows of French history, a mystery that has defied time and haunted the imagination of mankind for centuries. During the heyday of the Sun King Louis XIV, when the splendor and power of Versailles reigned, there was a secret that was more carefully hidden than the most precious jewels. It was the story of a man, a mysterious prisoner, who lived his entire life behind an iron mask that could not be removed. His identity was a riddle that no one could solve, and his life became a tragic legend. The stories that have been woven about this man have always made people shudder, and all have asked the same question: who is the man under the mask? The answer lies deep in the dungeons of the Bastille, and now, together, we will follow its traces. At the height of the Bourbon dynasty, when the winds of power blew through the gilded halls of the Louvre, a secret lay buried deeper than the foundation stones of the castle. The story begins in the final years of King Louis XIII, a king who was idle and melancholy, but who lacked the one thing that mattered most: an heir. The halls of the palace, once filled with laughter and banquets, were now filled with a heavy silence. Anne of Austria, who had been married to the king for many years, had yet to bear him a child, and the specter of a succession crisis hung over the kingdom. The courtiers had begun to whisper anxiously, and every howl of the night wind through the windows of the castle seemed to carry a prophecy of doom. His throne, his power, all were fading away, and the ministers began to calculate, while the prayers of the monks became more desperate than ever. One cold winter night, a miracle occurred, or so the entire kingdom believed. Queen Anne was finally pregnant, and joy burst forth, breaking the gloom of many years. The church bells rang out for days, signaling to everyone a new beginning. King Louis XIII, who had walked with a weary gait, now found a new lease on life. He went to every church, lit candles, and prayed fervently, and his eyes lit up with renewed hope. The whole country waited, breathless, for months of anticipation, and when the first bell rang on September 5, 1638, it announced the birth of a healthy dauphin. All of Paris exploded in unspeakable joy, and the name Louis d'Eudon, which means gift of God, was given to the heir to the kingdom. The whole world believed that a new king had been born and that a great dynasty had begun. But in the closed room, where the candlelight danced on the carved walls, a secret was buried. As the first prince was wrapped in white silk and brought out for the admiration of the whole palace, another sound came from deep within the delivery room. It was a small, faint cry, but it was enough to make the midwife stop breathing and Queen Anne close her eyes tightly. Incredibly, a second child had been born, another boy, a twin to the prince who had just been bestowed upon France. This boy had the same eyes as the prince, the same features as the prince, but his birth was a curse, not a blessing. A single heir was enough for a dynasty. Two heirs would be a disaster, an inevitable civil war. Cardinal Mazarin, the head of the royal family, was summoned at once. He entered the room, his air of authority and wisdom, and his dark eyes looked thoughtfully at both children. "This is an inexplicable event, Your Majesty," he whispered, his voice sounding more like a judgment than a comfort. "If the world knew that there were two kings with the same face, the whole kingdom would be torn apart by those who wanted power. No one would know which was the real king. Chaos would reign, and all that we have built would collapse." Queen Anne wept silently, and she covered her face with a silk veil. She knew that the cardinal was right. France did not need two kings, but only one, strong, undisputed. So a terrible and cruel decision was made. One of the two kings was to disappear, not by death, but by complete oblivion. The second boy was named Philippe and was taken from his mother's arms immediately after birth. All records of his birth were carefully erased, and those who had witnessed the event were sent to distant places, or threatened with a curse that would last forever. The boy was entrusted to a trusted man, one who had dedicated his life to serving the crown, and was taken away to a secret place. No one, not even King Louis XIII, knew of the boy's existence. From that moment on, there was only one king of France, Louis XIV. Philippe grew up in a world of silence and darkness. His home, an ancient villa in the countryside, was guarded by soldiers sworn to secrecy. He was educated in everything from classical literature to the art of war by a devoted and trustworthy tutor. However, he was not allowed to leave the garden, and he could only communicate with those who knew his secret. He grew up surrounded by books, stories, and voices whispered through closed doors, but without the love and warmth of the outside world. A loneliness gnawed at his soul. A longing for a world he could only know through the pages of books. He often asked about his parents, about his family, but all he received was a pitiful silence from his tutor. When Louis XIV ascended the throne, Philippe's existence became a threat to the French throne, more dangerous than any enemy. The young king grew up, a king of power and pride. He carried himself with a majestic presence and an unshakable confidence. He did not know about his twin brother, and Mazarin, in all his wisdom, knew that this truth must be buried forever. A man with the face of a king, but without the power of a king, would be the most dangerous weapon in the hands of any enemy. Philippe's life, although protected, now became a trap for himself. He learned of the existence of another world, and he began to ask dangerous questions, questions that could shake an entire kingdom. So a new, more cruel decision was made. Mazarin ordered a trusted man, a man known by another name, Monsieur de Saint-Mars, to take Philippe to a remote place, a place where no one would be able to find him. Something had to be placed over Philippe's face, something that would hide the king's face. Saint-Mars, a man whose loyalty had stood the test of time, came to Philippe's secret villa. When the boy saw the stern soldiers and the iron box in Saint-Mars's hands, he knew that his life was over, and another life, dark and lonely, had begun. He protested, he screamed, and he begged, but his words could not shake the loyalty of the soldiers. The iron mask, with its intricately designed buckles, was placed over Philippe's face. It covered everything except his eyes. The mask was impenetrable, and it was so heavy that it forced his neck to bend. But what hurt him most was not its weight, but his own death. It had stolen his identity, and it had turned him into a ghost. He had been taken to a castle on a remote island, where he had become a prisoner with a new name, secret prisoner, and with a fate sealed behind the iron mask. His life, with its books and dreams, was over, and from then on, he was only a rumor. And this is where our story begins. In the years that followed, no one would ever see the boy's face again, and no one would ever remember his existence. He became a legend, a story whispered in the dark corners of Paris. A man hidden behind an iron mask, a man with a secret that could shake an entire kingdom. And that secret lay deep within the iron mask. The fortress on Sainte Marguerite Island was a stone machine for despair. Its walls were built of grey stone, and it stood there, facing the bitter sea winds, like a gloomy giant looking out at the world. Inside those walls, in a cold and damp room, Philippe, the prisoner with the face of the king, began a new life of suffering. The iron mask, a fine work of cruelty, covered his entire face, except for his eyes, which were red with despair. It was locked, and its key was hidden deep inside a leather pouch, attached to Saint Mars's belt. To Saint Mars, Philippe was not a person, but a thing, a secret box containing a secret that could shake an entire kingdom. He had served Mazarin with unwavering loyalty, and now he served the will of Louis XIV. His life was a mirror of loneliness and cruelty, and he felt very comfortable in the shadows. The days passed, as slowly as the drops of water that dripped from the stone ceiling. Philippe did not speak. Whenever Saint Mars entered the room, with his soldiers following him, a tense silence filled the air. Philippe's eyes, the only thing visible through the mask, followed his every step, with a built-up hatred, a buried pain. Those eyes could not see through, and they could not see the bright world outside. The bright world that he could only imagine through stories and books had become something distant, like a dream full of illusions. He had forgotten the voices, the laughter, and the colors of a normal life. He only remembered the sound of the lock clicking every time Saint Mars approached. That lock was like a demon's voice, a voice that locked him in a world of despair. Saint Mars knew that his despair would never end. He had been tasked with protecting this secret, and he had done so with ruthless efficiency. He had made sure that no one, not even his own soldiers, could speak to the prisoner. If a soldier tried to do so, he would be hanged. Everything had been done with the utmost care, and not a single loophole had been left. But one thing Saint Mars had not counted on was the curiosity of the people outside. On the quay, near the castle, there was a small village, with fishermen who lived their lives peacefully. One of those fishermen was a young man named Antoine, a curious boy. He had often seen the soldiers walking back and forth on the fort, and he had often asked questions about the mysterious prisoner. One autumn morning, when the fog had covered the entire island, Antoine went closer to the fortress than he had ever seen before. He had no intention of doing anything wrong, he just wanted to explore and see something new. He found a path that had been made by goats on the cliffs, and he followed it. The path led him to a small area where he found a broken and leaking water pipe. It was a water pipe that ran from the fortress to the sea, and water was dripping from it. He looked at the pipe, and he was very curious. He did not know why the pipe had been made, and why it had been kept so secret. As he stood there for a moment, something fell out of the pipe. It was a small piece of cloth, rolled up, and tied with a small string. He picked it up, and he opened it. Inside, he found a small metal disc, with letters written on it. He couldn't read the letters, but he knew that it was a message. He was surprised, and he was curious. He knew that this was something important, and he knew that he had to do something about it. He put it in his pocket, and he went back to the village. He didn't say a word to anyone, and he waited for an opportunity to do something about it. Meanwhile, in Versailles, life went on as usual for King Louis XIV. The halls were filled with feasts and dances, and laughter rang out endlessly. The young king ruled with unshakable confidence, and he had no doubts about the existence of his twin brother. But one night, as he lay in bed, he had strange dreams. He saw a man, with a face exactly like his own, standing in a dark room. The man looked at him with deep hatred, and he screamed. Every time he woke up, he felt very scared, and he could not explain why. He assumed it was just a nightmare, and he forgot about it. Saint-Mars began to feel worried. He noticed that there was a leak in the water pipe, and he knew that something had happened. He ordered his soldiers to check everything, and he knew that someone had tried to do something. He knew that someone had tried to talk to the prisoner, and he knew that he had to find out who it was. He went to the village, and he began to ask questions. He threatened the fishermen, and he tried to make them tell the truth. Antoine, who knew the secret, was very afraid. He did not know what to do, and he did not know what to say. He knew that his life was in danger, and he knew that he had to do something to protect himself. He decided to do something reckless. One night, when everyone was asleep, he went to the fort. He followed the path, and he found a broken water pipe. He took the small metal disc out of his pocket, and he put it in the water pipe. He hoped that the prisoner would find it, and he hoped that the prisoner would be able to understand its meaning. He knew that this was a reckless thing to do, and he knew that he would have to pay for it. But he did it, and he felt very happy. He felt that he had done something right, and he felt that he had helped someone. In his loneliness and despair, Philippe found a ray of hope. When he saw the small metal disc that had fallen into the pipe, his heart pounded with hope. He knew that there was someone out there, someone who knew of his existence, and someone who was trying to help him. He picked up the small metal disc, and he looked at the letters engraved on it. It was a code made of substituted letters, a code used by soldiers to communicate with each other. He had studied this code, and he knew that he could solve it. He sat down, and he began to decipher the code. After a few hours, he cracked the code. It was a message written in alternate letters. The message said, "Have faith. We are coming to help you." He couldn't believe what he saw. He knew there was someone out there, and he knew he was not alone. He felt so happy, and he felt so hopeful. He put the little metal disc in his pocket, and he waited. He knew his life was about to change, and he knew he was going to be freed. Saint-Mars, however, quickly discovered the problem. He found another small metal disc, the one that Antoine had sent. He knew that someone had tried to contact the prisoner, and he knew that he had to find out who it was. He ordered his men to check everything, and he knew that he had to find out who had sent the message. He went to the village, and he began to ask questions. He threatened the fishermen, and he tried to get them to tell the truth. But no one knew anything. Saint-Mars knew that he had to do something desperate. He ordered his soldiers to go to all the houses, and he ordered them to search. They found a leather bag, and they found a small metal disc in it. They arrested Antoine, and they brought him to the fortress. When he arrived at the fortress, Saint-Mars looked at him with an angry expression. He knew that he was the one who had sent the message, and he knew that he knew the prisoner's secret. Antoine was not afraid. He looked into Saint-Mars' eyes, and he said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know any prisoners. I'm just a simple fisherman." Saint-Mars did not trust him. He ordered his soldiers to take him to a dark room, and he ordered them to torture him. But Antoine did not say a word. He endured all the pain, and he did not say a word. Meanwhile, in Versailles, King Louis XIV was growing anxious. He could not sleep, and he could not forget his nightmares. He had seen a man, with a face exactly like his own, standing in a dark room, and he had seen him being tortured. He knew that something had happened, and he knew that he had to do something. He called one of his soldiers, a soldier he trusted, and he ordered him to go to the fortress. When the soldier arrived at the fortress, he saw Antoine. He saw Antoine being tortured, and he knew that he had to do something. He told Saint-Mars that he had to stop, and he said that he had been sent by the king. Saint-Mars did not believe him. He knew that he was lying, and he knew that he had tried to do something to help Antoine. He ordered his soldiers to kill him, but Antoine was faster than him. He took a knife, and he killed one of the soldiers. He took his gun, and he shot Saint-Mars. In the chaos of the battle, Saint-Mars was badly wounded, and his soldiers were defeated. The king's soldier rushed to free Antoine, and they found Philippe, the prisoner with the king's face, sitting in a corner of the room, with a look of despair on his face. He could not believe what he saw. He saw a war being fought for him, and he saw a man coming to his aid. The king's soldier approached him, and he said, "I am a soldier of the king, and I have been sent by the king to free you. Follow me." Philippe did not trust him. He thought it was a trap, and he thought he had come to kill him. He refused to go with him, and he said, "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a common prisoner, and I'm going to die here." The king's soldier felt very sad, and he knew that he had to do something to make the boy believe him. He took a letter out of his pocket, a letter that had been written by King Louis XIV. The letter said that he was a soldier of the king, and that he had been sent to free Philippe. When Philippe read the letter, he could not believe what he saw. He knew that this was not a trap, and he knew that he would be freed. He followed the king's soldiers, and they walked out of the fortress. Antoine followed them, and he looked into Philippe's face. He saw an expression that was exactly like his king's, and he knew that he was right. He knew that the prisoner was the king's twin brother. They got on a ship, and they sailed away from the island. When they arrived in Paris, they went to a secret palace, where Philippe was awaited by a woman. That woman was Queen Anne, his mother. She had aged a lot, and she no longer looked like a powerful woman. She cried when she saw her son, and she held him in her arms. She said, "My son, I have waited for you for so long. I have not been able to forget you." Philippe was speechless. He cried in his mother's arms, and he felt so happy. He knew that he was no longer alone, and he knew that he had a family. He stayed with his mother, and he started a new life. King Louis XIV came to visit him, and he felt so sad when he saw his twin brother. He apologized to him, and he said that he would do everything to make him happy. Philippe could not forgive him. He said, "You took my life. You took my identity. You turned me into a ghost. I cannot forgive you." King Louis XIV felt very sad, and he knew that he could not do anything. He left him a secret palace, and he left him a normal life. But he could not forget what he had done. Philippe had a new life. He was free, but he could not forget the past. The iron mask, a symbol of pain, was always in his pocket. He could not forget the clicking of the locks, the dark rooms, and the nightmares. He knew that he was no longer a normal person, and he knew that he could no longer live a normal life.